Now being the time of 3 o'clock, I'd like to call to order an agenda, a workshop of the meeting of the Board of Directors of the Vallecitos Water District, 3 p.m. October 31st. Pledge of Allegiance. Director Evans, could you lead us?
My pleasure. Thank you.
Nice to have you back.
Thank you. Hand over heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Electronic roll call, please. Push your buttons. And we are all present, all five. And I need a motion to adopt the agenda for the workshop.
Move. Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous? All right, let's move right to the items for discussion. Power purchase agreement, number 1. Number 2 will be uses for lift station number 1 property.
All right, so I'll jump in on item 1. So this is just an informational item for the board, and what we're trying to do is bring the board up to speed on the district-wide solar project. This arose from the board's desire to minimize operational costs, particularly electricity costs, so that's what kind of initiated this. And we've been working with our partner, Terra Verde, for quite some time now to get to where we're at today. The approval of the PPA is actually scheduled for next week's board meeting, so November 6th board meeting is when we have it scheduled. So no action will be taken today, it's just an informational discussion. And given the large amount of information you're going to hear about this project, I felt it was important to give the board more opportunity than just at the November 6th meeting. So that's why we had the workshop today. So we're here today with our consultant to answer any questions. You'll be hearing a presentation, maybe a little from staff, mostly from our consultant, and we want to hear any feedback, any questions you may have to better prepare us for the meeting on November 6th. There is a second item on the agenda, as President Martin mentioned. It's going to be about potential uses for Lift Station 1. And I would encourage the board to defer any questions you have related to other uses for Lift Station 1 until that item. And if we can go through the first item, talk about the structure, the terms of the PPA, and then we can move on to the second item, and then we can use both of those discussions as we move forward to November 6th. And one thing you'll hear during the presentation is there is a bit of a time element. There's a tax structure called investment tax credits that really factored into the power purchase agreement price that we have. And you'll hear a little bit more about that, I think, from our consultant, Kevin Ross. He'll explain the timing of that and what the incentives mean. So again, we're not looking for any action today, but we certainly want to hear any feedback the board may have. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to James.
Thank you, President Martin, members of the board. I'm not going to go over all the dates that the board or engineering committee has seen this, but just to kind of give you an overview highlight here. Back in January 2018, the board actually awarded the contract to Terra Verde to start looking at the sites. Basically, 3 main sites were evaluated. The one at Twin Oaks, which is shown on the map up here, and then, of course, our Lift Station 1 site. The third site, as the board may recall, was the Mar Reservoir site, which is just off page, for float and cover site. Later on, back in September of 2018, after further evaluation and a feasibility study was completed, Terra Verde came back and gave a presentation to the board. At that point, the board elected to move forward with 2 sites, which is what we're here to talk about today, which is the Twin Oaks Reservoir site here, which is a RESBCT, a RESBIT site, and that will be further explained through Kevin's presentation. And then, of course, a net metering site, which is Lift Station 1. Since then, also, several other actions have happened on this project. Back in March, the board took action to move forward with the mitigated negative declaration. We hired BRG consultants. So not only at the next board meeting will the board be looking at this PPA agreement, the board will also be certifying the mitigated negative deck associated with this project. So both actions are required to move forward with it. Obviously, as far as getting people to propose, back in July of 2019, working with and through Terra Verde, we sent out a RFP to try and get prospective solar photovoltaic site developers. I believe we got 5 proposals, and then back in September of 2019, we conducted interviews with the top 3. And then from there, back in October 1st of 2019, just earlier this month, we brought those results back to the Engineering Equipment Committee. So today I have Kevin Ross, he's the Vice President of Terra Verde in the development group, or business development group. He's here to give an update. You guys probably recall Kevin was also here back in September. They gave the initial update that showed the potential savings from these projects that the district could realize. So today we're going to go over much the very similar presentation, but obviously we're also going to be comparing what the board saw back in September as potential savings with now actual savings based on the proposed power purchase agreement rates seen. With that, I'd like to introduce Kevin to start the presentation.
Thanks a lot, James. Good afternoon. We're going to be jumping through just a couple of refresher slides. I have a clicker here. Okay. So here's today's agenda. I'll run through a couple of quick definitions just for reference, and then a little summary of the process of going through the feasibility study. A lot of this you've seen prior. Whoops. In the June 2018 review session. Along with that, a little update on the interconnection agreement status. And then we'll get into the RFP process that we assisted the district in running to select a PPA provider. A little overview of that process, and then some specifics about the 2 project sites, Lift Station 1 and Twin Oaks Reservoir. And then sort of a deeper dive on a comparison of the savings projections and some of the other noteworthy elements of how the project was originally envisioned and where we are today with a power purchase agreement fully negotiated and ready for the board's consideration. And then hopefully we'll have plenty of time at the end to address any questions that you all might have. So definitions. Some of this, I think all of this, you've probably seen at one point or another, but just as a refresher, we have 2 different types of tariffs that are being used for the district's benefit on these projects. At the Lift Station 1 site, we're going to be using a net metering tariff, or NEM, which basically allows for any excess energy that's not consumed by the Lift Station 1. When the solar system is generating it, it goes directly to the grid, and the district will get full retail credit for that energy at the time of use that it's being exported. SDG&E will then true up your monthly bill based on those credits that have been allocated or have been recorded through that bidirectional meter that will be in place there. The next tariff that is going to be used is at the Twin Oaks Reservoir site is what's known as the Renewable Energy Self-Generation Bill Credit Transfer Tariff, which is quite a mouthful. For basically, it's an export tariff where 100% of the energy that is being produced by the array at Twin Oaks will be sent to the grid. It'll be flowing through a production meter that SDG&E will be looking at. All of that, all of the kWh associated with that generation is then allocated to various other accounts that the district has, in which case those allocations will receive a portion of the total amount of credit that this solar project will be producing. Those allocations have been defined by staff, and they can be updated on a regular basis with a simple one-page form with SDG&E to either add or subtract additional accounts or to change the allocation profile of the accounts that are currently defined. Basically, the way it works is that these credits represent monetary value, and that monetary value is then deducted from the applicable, what we refer to as a benefiting account, or in this case, 11 separate meters that the district has that have been defined for being the beneficiaries of the bill credit transfer. So a little bit different than NEM in that you're basically benefiting multiple accounts that are remote from the location of where the array is situated versus a direct one-on-one type of relationship that you have with a net metering arrangement. PPA is obviously power purchase agreement. References to pro forma will be later in the presentation regarding savings, projections. Time of use just refers to the type of rate structures that we're currently operating under here. Both residential and commercial rate structures are now all time of use within SDG&E territory. RFP obviously stands for the request for proposal, investment tax credit. We're not going to talk too much about asset management services, but that's basically a description of the O&M activities, monitoring, all of what goes into managing the array after it's up and running. And provider refers to, in this case, the PPA provider, which is the entity that would be owning, operating, and maintaining the system over time. So just a quick overview on the feasibility assessment. Again, here you saw this a while back. We basically did a district-wide assessment of all of the energy consumption profiles for all of the meters, and then went about discerning which of those meters would make good candidates for solar and/or solar plus battery storage as applicable. Once we finished that exercise, we looked at specific sites. Basically, it's a filtering process where we end up with a handful of sites out of the larger population that merit a deeper dive on logistical constraints and infrastructure conditions, primarily the electrical infrastructure that exists at these sites, switchgear, capacities, SDG&E infrastructure as well. After that was considered, we developed certain what-if scenarios associated with system sizing and different types of solar installations, worked on some layouts, worked with staff to figure out the best scenario for where those arrays might be located, and then started applying these different tariff considerations, which allowed us to project savings and benefit for those sites that looked like they made sense. We also looked at energy storage. I think I'll reserve any discussion about energy storage maybe till Q&A. But in a nutshell, we didn't see a lot of benefit based on the evaluation that we did. It's now 2 years old. And then from that, we provided the district with some pro forma financial analysis that included 20-year cash flows based on what was then sort of the industry standard term for PPAs. We provided a set of findings, a report on that subject, and as James mentioned, based on that report and preference to pursue the two projects that we're focused on now, ended up retaining a environmental consultant to conduct the CEQA study and mitigated negative declaration process. Just a quick update on the interconnection. You may remember that Terra Verde processed the interconnection applications for the two sites before the deadline of December 31st in 2017, which allows the district to maintain an eligibility for grandfathering of the what would be the 2018 time of use periods, which are advantageous for sites or meters that have solar connected to them. And that'll last for 10 years or up until, in this case, up until July 2027. And that's included in the pro forma analysis, by the way. So on to the RFP process. So once the board approved moving forward in June 2018, Terra Verde began the process of developing a set of specifications, detailed scope of work, some design, early stage design, and the RFP itself, along with various forms and templates and a PPA contract sample that was used as the basis for running the RFP. Through that process, we received 5 qualified proposals. We went through a sort of a qualitative and quantitative review process for the district and basically created a large matrices of pros and cons for each one of the proposals, and then met with the district staff to discern which proposers might be best suited for maybe a shortlisting process, which we did. After that, the culmination of the interviews and some communication on best and final offers. PCI, Performance Contracting, Inc., and their financing partner, Kenyon, was selected as the preferred PPA provider. You can see those are the rationale there for why they were selected above the other two. It really came down to...
Where's
sure.
the rationale?
Sure, go ahead.
Where's the rationale?
Oh, so primarily for price. They were the...
Do you have a slide that shows us the pricing that came in?
I can speak to the pricing. I don't have a dedicated slide that shows a pricing comparison amongst the 3 finalists. You're going to see the PPA price here and just on the next slide, I think. But in a nutshell, they this firm or this team provided best pricing. They were highly qualified, had plenty of experience with the type of installations we're talking about, and have a fairly extensive portfolio of existing power purchase agreement projects that they've already built and that are operating. They also had an interesting design approach that ended up being the best design for both of these sites. And I think in terms of a very tightly run and quick turn negotiation process, they were willing to use the template PPA contract that was provided in the RFP as a starting point, with relatively little changes to that template, which really made the process move along quite swiftly. So 2.5 weeks to negotiate that contract. There's a laundry list of the items that the PPA contract includes, and you'll be seeing all of these elements in the package of documents that you'll receive prior to the November 6th board meeting. Basically, it's the set of PPA terms, a performance guarantee associated with the project for both sites, a cost reimbursement agreement, the technical specifications that were part and parcel to the RFP, along with the same general conditions, performance and payment bonds. We've also included their proposed schedule, which is written into the PPA, as well as O&M monitoring, warranty and insurance requirements, the site license agreement, and terms associated with renewable energy certificate ownership and options for buyout or for purchase if the district is interested in taking over the asset at some point during the term of the PPA. So just a quick overview on the benefits and how the PPA really works with respect to leveraging the investment tax credit. So basically a third party that has tax liability or tax appetite can take advantage of the investment tax credit, which is a federal credit. Currently, that credit is valued at 30% of the project capital value. By being able to have access to that credit, the third-party owner and operator can provide public agencies with reduced cost PPA rates because that's such a substantial subsidy that they're receiving directly in the tax year that the system is built. In this case, the PPA rate came in at a little under 8 cents, 7.79 cents per kilowatt hour, fixed for 25 years with 0 escalation. So that's basically a fixed price that you'll see for these two sites and for the benefits associated with the projection of savings is certainly a very good hedge against the future escalating costs of energy from SDG&E. The district will, written into the PPA is the ability for the district to recover the development costs that it has incurred thus far, which would include consultants' fees for Terra Verde and for the secret consultant, any others that maybe were involved, legal inspections, those types of costs that we refer to as development costs. They've been those costs have been handed to the PPA provider, and we've created an exhibit to the power purchase agreement, which is called the cost reimbursement agreement. All those costs are clearly defined in there, and basically they will be writing a check to the district for all those costs specific to the terms of the PPA. And those costs then are included in their financing, which they derive benefit for through this 30% investment tax credit. So it's a win-win, public-private partnership scenario with respect to the terms of the PPA. The provider is going to be responsible for all aspects of designing, building, owning, and operating the system. And there's specific terms in the PPA for maintenance and for guaranteeing the performance of the system over the full term of the agreement. In addition, the district will have a couple of buyout options or opportunities during that 25-year period to take title to the system for obviously a depreciated value, or what we refer to as fair market value. And that would occur at year 10, year 20, and then the end of the term at 25 years. So just a brief overview of the projects. At lift station 1, it'd be approximately a 236 kW system size. In the original design that Terra Verde put together, we were specifying a fixed tilt system that would use in-ground foundations. Typically, those are, in a situation like this, it would be a driven steel pier. However, PCI was able to come up with a design that precludes having to use in-ground foundations. So it's basically a ballasted system with large precast concrete blocks that are that sit right on the graded surface that provide the structure for the racking and the PV modules, and with the appropriate wind zone loading. So it's an interesting design that really precludes having to either pound steel into the ground or to dig it up and pour concrete. You see the first year production value there, 425,000 kWh. And then the TOU rates, as I mentioned, the period or the timing on the rates, particularly the peak period, which is the most notable part in terms of solar, is grandfathered. That means that the 2018 rates will, as they relate to these two sites, are using the 2018 TOU periods all the way through 2027, even though, as of this year, all of the other meters have been switched over to the peak period shift, which basically means that the peak period is now defined between 4 to 9 p.m. rather than from noon to 6 p.m., which is the latter is, or the earlier period of time is more advantageous to solar.
Okay, I'm
Yes.
sorry, you lost me there. Could you do that one more time?
Sure. So solar production is greatest during the mid part of the day, and prior to 2019, the peak period and the highest cost of energy associated with that peak period was noon to 6. Okay, so if the energy that you might be sending to the grid from that solar system through the net metering agreement would then be valued at that peak period price, full retail price. Now that the peak period is shifted later in the day, between 4 and 9 p.m., the sun's already set, solar energy is no longer being produced, so the energy that was produced and potentially sent to the grid under the net metering agreement between 6 and 12 is valued lower or at a less at a less sizable rate structure.
I got that part. How much are we getting?
How much are you getting?
Yeah, which one are we getting? Are we getting the 4 to 9, or are we getting, that's what I need?
No, you're getting your grandfather. That's the benefit
Thank you.
that we see under the early interconnection agreement. Yes.
The first size, 236 kWDC, I'm sure kilowatts, what's DC?
Direct current.
Direct current.
Right. Yeah. So that's what's known as like a nameplate value for the system based on the inverter size. And the inverters are used to convert the DC energy that's coming directly from the solar panels to AC energy, which is then hardwired directly to the switchgear where the meter is. Yeah.
Director?
Yeah, Kevin.
Yeah.
You mentioned on the NEM rate that the surplus power from the LS1 site would be sold back at the full retail rate, back to the SDG&E. Is that guaranteed for the length of the contract, or is there a chance that changes as well?
Yeah, so that's a good point. So I addressed that in a slide that talks about risks, but basically the net metering agreement between the district and SDG&E is what secures that arrangement. So if you have a 20-year net metering agreement, and we will through the process of interconnection application. As we get closer to the actual installation, there'll be an agreement in place. Very much like the district has an agreement for their existing solar for the canopies.
And so we know what that time period will be?
Currently, those contracts are for 20 years. That's a standard set by the PUC for all of the net metering agreements that each individual IOU will write with their customers. Yeah.
So there's a chance that would change after the 20 years?
Yes, yes. So, the net metering has changed. You may know that already. And will continue to change. And that's just something that the CPUC has to grapple with. And the good news is that proceeding, expeditiously with this process will then lock the district into what's now known as NEM 2.0. There are proceedings that will be starting next year on the fate of NEM 2.0, which will be NEM 3.0. So it's an ongoing process that the state and the PUC are involved with.
So you had to make some assumptions for the last part of the last 5 years of what that might be?
Well, yeah, so the assumptions that went into the savings projections utilize our best understanding of the rates as they exist today and where they may be going in the future. But it's not a projection of the, I think the mic died.
Yeah.
There it is.
Do we get it back? Oh, there we go. Great. Yeah, to answer your question, the projections are based on what we know about the rates today. And NEM 2.0 is, the district will sign an agreement with SDG&E for that tariff. So that'll be in place for 20 years.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I pushed the button, did it go off?
No, I tried doing it and I shut it off.
Oh, okay. Am I on?
But go right ahead.
Yeah.
Am I? Oh.
Yes, you're on, you're
All
green
right,
light.
thank you. You might be going to answer this question in your next couple of slides, but I had a question regarding the mitigation of the energy production shortfall. Are you going to be addressing that under like risks?
Yeah.
Then I'll just wait till then.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I have a quick question.
sure.
Need a little explanation on this, because I have a request to speak mode, and it's shutting him off.
And request to speak, it turns off his.
Then how do I know who's requesting to ask a question if I have to shut him off?
Well, the request to speak is between the board members, it has nothing to do with
Right, but I'm saying, for instance, Director Evans wanted to speak, and if I don't have this on request to speak, I would not know that.
it. Right, we'll just keep track of it and we'll put his back on when it's turned off.
Okay. That's something we can fix, I hope.
I'm pretty sure we can have that changed, yes.
Okay, thank you, sorry.
Oh, no problem. So this is a layout of the Lift Station 1 solar array. You can see the rows there. Those are fixed tilt at 20 degrees. And they'll have, as I mentioned, a support structure that does not penetrate the ground. The Twin Oaks site, again, it uses the...
Sorry, quick question.
Sure.
Is that all it can fit, or that's all you need?
Yeah, so that is...
Obviously, there's more space going back to the...
There is more space, but under the net metering arrangement, you're precluded from building an array that is, sizably more than your current consumption, right? So, and in fact, it would not be advantageous to the district to do that under net metering because you wouldn't be getting credit for that energy that is above and beyond what you can true up your bill for a full year.
Thank you.
So Twin Oaks is very similar with respect to the type of the system. It's obviously much larger and covers both reservoir caps. It'll be a lower profile system using a ballasted arrangement with precast concrete blocks that the racking is connected to, and then the solar panels are just bolted directly onto that rack. Production is a little over 3 million kWh per year. And then again, the bill credit allocation, the benefit, the monetary benefit is broken up among 11 separate accounts, SDG&E accounts, and that will be accounted for by SDG&E on a monthly basis. So each 30-day billing cycle will include the deduction for the applicable meter with the bill credits. Yes?
You said the first year production was 334 kilowatt per year. I think that says per hour.
Yeah, it's kilowatts per hour per year. Kilowatt hours per year.
So is this 3 million, round numbers, a yearly amount or
Yes.
a daily amount, an hourly amount?
No, that's 3.3 million kilowatt hours per year.
Per year, okay.
Yeah. Correct.
And one more question, this is probably for staff and a little premature, but including the Meadowlark Water Reclamation Facility meter, I don't know why we would include that one rather than some others that we pay for, because supposedly that's a pass-through that other people are paying for.
Yes, absolutely, but we'll still end up getting the savings on it, and we'll still pass through the full loaded costs to the others. And Meadowlark is our largest energy consumer in the district.
Right,
So
so
even with Meadowlark and with pass-through, it uses a lot of energy just for our primary and secondary treatment, which is not a pass-through cost.
Thank you.
The estimated bill credits for the first year is almost $400,000. That number will go down a little bit each year because of system degradation at about at about 1/2%. The time of use rate will shift from the meter that's at the Twin Oaks site from the PA1 rate over to the DGR rate. Basically, what that means is that there's a side benefit for that meter there of having a lower demand charge component on that bill. And then obviously you have your grandfathering also for this site as well. Yeah.
Mr. President?
Yes, sir. Director?
The price, the first year, is that just Twin Oaks or is that LS1 and Twin Oaks? The 400,000?
Well, no, that's just for this site, for the Twin Oaks site, because the bill credits are only applicable to the RSBCT tariff.
Will we be seeing what the benefit is on LS1?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you will. So each one of your SDG&E bills each month will show what the net benefit of the solar was for that month.
But will we see what that amount is today?
Right.
Or whenever?
Yeah, Director Hernandez, there's a slide coming up later.
Okay.
Yeah.
That shows.
Yeah, we'll show a projection.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I've got one more question, I'm sorry.
Sure.
I should have asked it a couple of slides ago, but tell me the difference, and I'm not a real estate person at all, but tell me the difference between depreciated or fair market value versus book value. Because my understanding is depreciated value is book value, which means it's been depreciated over 20 years to zero. Book value is then zero, versus your fair market value is what it's worth to anybody at that time. Am I correct?
Yes, the two are synonymous with that respect. I mean, you're looking out 25 years to the end of the term.
No, depreciated and fair market value are not synonymous.
Well, it's
value
the
would be
depreciated value of the asset, okay? So it's referred to as fair market value for IRS rules requirements. The reason that the ITC benefit can be derived here through a PPA is that the power purchase agreement cannot have any terms in it that make it appear to be a sale of the equipment from the PPA provider to the agency. That's the reason it defines fair market value and defines buyout options without target amounts, without target pricing, or any of that sort of thing.
So after 20 years of this metal and paint and sitting out there, it's pretty well useless.
Not necessarily.
To move it,
Yeah,
does
so
it make sense?
the solar panels have a warranted life of 25 years. In other words, they have a power production warranty. In practice, though, they will actually continue to produce energy for longer than that 25-year period,
But-
with proper maintenance.
But nowhere near optimum, it would be somewhat.
Well, even at the end of 25 years, the power production warranty is, 80% of the capacity of the modules on day one. So that's still a pretty decent amount of energy coming from the panels.
Thank you.
Yeah. And this is an array layout. This is PCI's design for Twin Oaks. Access to all the vents and the existing
We have a question.
access points are maintained.
Director Sinella, you lit
Yes.
up.
There we go. Hey, James, I'm sure you thought about this, but I have to ask. These are tanks. I've been inside these tanks before. I don't know, can they handle the weight of all these, sounds like massive concrete blocks lined up across them?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the first things we gave Terra Verde, our requirement. So it's called H20 loading. Basically, it's freeway loading. So the tanks are designed to hold up to what is considered freeway loading. So we're talking heavy vehicles and quite a bit of both static and dynamic loading. So within the design of the array, they have to stay underneath that loading requirement, which is what they did. That was one of the criteria when we sent it out.
Thank you.
Yeah, and as part of the the due diligence associated with the 60%, 90%, and so on design that the provider is responsible for giving to the district for review, it'll include the engineering and the structural engineering analysis associated with putting the ballasting on top of the existing reservoir caps. So I know this table's a bit busy, but this table basically captures the differences between Terra Verde's original projections that were in the feasibility study findings on the left and the current values associated with the negotiated PPA. So let me walk through some of the more important elements here. First of all, probably the most obvious one is the PPA rate. We originally estimated the rate to be 11 cents per kilowatt hour at lift station 1 and about a half a penny less than that at the Twin Oaks Reservoir site. And at the time, that was based on current market, PPA market rates. It was also based on an assumption that each site or each project would have to stand on its own, so that if there were going to be, say, two separate PPAs, worst case, two separate PPA providers, that each site would have its own rate. On the right-hand side, you'll see that the actual rate that's written into the contract is considerably less. And one of the reasons is that the PCA and their financing partner are viewing this project as from a rate standpoint as one project. Even though we could or the district could purchase through the buyout program the Lift Station 1 site, the Twin Oaks site would still have that same 7.79 cents per kilowatt hour price, which is beneficial to the district with respect to potential concerns about the future at LS1. So that's probably the most important element of the change in the savings. The system sizes are roughly the same, slightly smaller system size than was originally projected at LS1. That's primarily due to the fact that PCI is proposing to use slightly more efficient solar panels than what we had originally projected in our analysis. Basically, that's the difference between, in the market, they refer to standard efficiency versus high efficiency. So that allows you to utilize panels that produce more wattage, and then therefore you need less of them to create a certain capacity of system. That's the reason you see that slightly smaller system size there. You'll also see the calculated net savings associated with this PPA rate and the 25-year cumulative savings as well. The primary difference here, other than the PPA rate, was the assumptions on the length of term. So originally, sort of market conditions 2 years ago, PPAs most commonly had a 20-year term. Today, that's changing. The standard term length today is 25 years. So it's a little bit of apples and oranges here, but we see that the numbers are greater, obviously, on the left, because we're looking at a 25-year time horizon as opposed to a 20-year time horizon originally in the feasibility assessment. Also, the renewable energy certificates that are sort of a commodity that is associated with producing solar energy 2 years ago were not valued as much as they are today. So in our original analysis, we chose not to include them since they had very little value. Today, they have reasonable value. And as you can see there, in the case of the Twin Oaks system, over a 25-year period based on today's rates, what we're seeing in the market when we go to sell RECs in the marketplace, if we were to continue to see that over 25 years, it'd be $300,000. And in fact, those rates are going up. We manage REC sales and brokering for a number of our clients, and we're seeing increases almost on a monthly basis. So if that were to continue for the long haul, those numbers would continue to increase as well. So I would consider them conservative at this point. So that's another one of the differences between the original projection, where we did not include the value and for that commodity, and now we have included it in the most current set of pro formas. I've already spoken, I think, about the rates and the grandfathering. We used a 3% SDG&E annual escalator originally, and in the most current set of pro formas. With respect to consumption offset, we found that, and this gets to an explanation about why we're seeing two separate options on system size for LS1 in this slide. The data set that we used in the feasibility assessment 2 years ago had a consumption that is sizably more on an annual basis than the data set that we used recently for creating that same savings projection, about 130,000 kWh less. And that really has to do with the fact that one data set was in a dry year and the other data set was in a wet year, and obviously the pump operation is different for those situations. So you're looking at basically maybe a high level of energy consumption and a low level of energy consumption based on weather and conditions that are applicable to the operation at that site. So I felt that it would be reasonable to look at a scenario, a system size scenario that would be applicable to that lower overall annual consumption. And that's the reason for the center column there with the smaller system size and the corresponding figures that would go with that system size, about 69 kW less. Also, you see the consumption offset there. The target value was 90%, so we tried to keep that 90% with a different system size. This doesn't mean that we need to downsize the system. This is just providing the district with a range, I guess you would call it, between small and large, again, depending on the amount of consumption in any given year at that site. So these are, I think I've addressed most of the differences between the original projections and where we're at today. Certainly the PPA price is probably the biggest contributor. I mentioned the differences in design approach that we had. I mentioned the term of the agreement is different, 20 years versus 25 years. System size and changes in consumption at LS1, mentioned that. There's some minor changes also in the amount of production that is now built into the PPA in terms of a performance guarantee. At the Twin Oaks site, the PPA provider had a fairly sophisticated software system that allowed them to fairly accurately project the amount of shading that will occur in the winter months on the west tank, at least on an edge portion of it, where the adjacent hillside will be casting a shadow for that period of time. So that's been baked in to the provider's energy production estimate and into the performance guarantee. So a little bit about risks associated with entering into a PPA. Certainly there's a fair amount of war stories out there in the marketplace about providers and or financiers going bankrupt and whatnot. So we look at current and potential long-term solvency of these providers. In this case, Kenyon has a very robust portfolio, and we did a little research on how those systems are performing and their ability to fund their ongoing O&M and monitoring, and came back with very favorable conditions and responses. There's also I talked a little bit about the operating profile issues, particularly at LS1. I guess the same thing could be said for the RES-BCT project if the benefiting accounts were to substantially drop off in their consumption profiles as well. Meaning that if that were to happen, we'd have to make some adjustments in those benefiting accounts, either adding additional accounts or swapping out accounts that had low consumption with accounts that had more linear or consumption that was more predictable. The outcome of all that means that under a situation where you're not able to allocate all of the bill credits that bank over the years period, then at the end of the year, the clock starts over again. Any bill credits left in the bank are basically belong to the utility at that point and can't be carried over to the next year. So that has to be watched pretty closely. There's also always the risk of SDG&E rate changes, and I guess, Craig, to your point, potentially NEM tariff changes, which is a PUC controlled rule or tariff. None of us know what that looks like in the future, but there's always the potential that it would be less favorable than it is today. There's also the potential for unforeseen issues during construction that could cause delays, and obviously the sooner we have a project up and running, the sooner we can take advantage of the grandfathering associated with the time of use period shift to the benefit of the district. So. This slide covers basically the board agenda or the resolutions that the board will be considering on the 6th. They're primarily bound up into two categories. One is the CEQA mitigated negative declaration approval or adopting that, MMD for CEQA. The other is the approval of the 4217 findings, and basically I've tried to define what that means in that paragraph there at the top. Basically, the findings state that the benefit, the monetary benefit of installing the solar in terms of energy production and the value of that energy as procured through the PPA is greater than, is less than what the cost of SDG&E energy would be, or is projected to be over that same period of time.
Excuse me, don't change slides. Can you go back one slide?
Sure.
Put something on it. Interconnection construction delays. Maybe you're going to get to that, I don't know. But what I do want to know is, let's assume that this has been approved by the board. When does it start and when does it finish? And when do we start getting credit? Is that coming up, or is that something?
Let me skip to it right now.
Thank you.
Okay. So this is what happens after the contract's executed. So once the board approves the 4217 findings, the contract is signature ready. The board will direct the general manager to sign it. The PPA provider will sign it. At that point, they start in on all of their what we refer to as conditions precedents activities. Those are the activities that they need to complete before they can actually mobilize on the sites and begin construction. These are things like finishing up on the due diligence, most notably the structural engineering associated with the two tanks at the reservoir site, completing any of the mitigation requirements in the CEQA report, which I don't think we have any, other than monitoring. We're handing off the SDG&E interconnection agreement to them, which means that they'll be responsible from this point on of working with SDG&E to make sure the interconnections are designed and installed properly. They'll be doing a 60, 90, and 100% design review and approval with district staff and with Terra Verde's assistance. They will, during the 110 days of the conditions precedence period, at some point, probably near the end of that, be providing confirmation of their project finance and their ability to proceed with construction. The district will then provide them with a notice to proceed for construction. Again, this would occur at this stage early next year, and then they would proceed with the construction, and we'd have finished systems that were ready for final PTO and startup in September of next year.
And what are the penalties if September it's not ready to go?
There are liquidated damages defined in the contract at $1,000 a day. If there are delays that are totally the responsibility of the provider. In other words, if there are delays due to district activities or whatnot, then certainly that would not apply. But if for some reason they are delayed in sourcing their equipment, for example, or delays in certain portions of the financing over the term of the construction, then in fact the LDs would kick in.
Other questions so far? Director Evans?
I do have some, but are you finished? There's more to go.
Let me check.
It's the last slide.
Yep.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
We're to questions. So.
All right.
Perfect timing.
So I think I have three, and they kind of go back to the beginning, but you'll be.
Sure.
The first one was, you had mentioned that for the Twin Oaks area, we can reallocate where the energy is credited. Is that the correct word?
Correct.
And is that, you can do that as often as necessary? Or are you limited with a time frame or a number of times per year, or?
Yeah, good question. There is a limit. You can do it once per year.
Once per year?
Correct.
Okay. And did you have something else to say? Oh, Jim? Okay, once per year, but you can do that?
You can make as many changes as you want, but only once per year.
Okay. So you could change 5 of the locations?
You could
but
change
as
the
long as-
entire list,
Okay.
but you can only do that
One
once per
time.
year. Yeah.
All right, and then my second question was, I'm going back to the one I asked you. I still don't understand what mitigate energy production shortfall means. I'm assuming it means that they didn't produce the energy they told us they would. So how
That's
do they
correct.
mitigate that?
So in the contract, in the power purchase agreement, there is an exhibit that defines what the value of the energy would be in the event that they don't meet the terms of the performance guarantee. And that value would then be used as a calculator or a multiplier for determining the amount of the check that they would cut for the district.
So is that like if they didn't produce 1,000 kilowatt hours, then they would owe us the value of the money? And is that the value at that 0.779 thing, or?
No, it's not the value of the PPA price. It's a slightly less than the PPA price, and it's calculated based on the performance criteria that was negotiated for the system.
I see.
Typically, performance guarantees do not reflect the full value, okay? There's really no way that a financier would absorb that kind of risk. But it does provide enough clout that they want to avoid running into a shortfall condition. All providers do. And keep in mind, all of the energy that system produces is being bought by the district. So the more energy the district consumes from that system, the better the monetary return for the provider.
So in the contract, the amount they would pay is formulated based on the percentage of non-production, and is it consistent like through the whole 25 years? Or is it varied?
It's fixed.
It's fixed.
It's fixed for 25 years.
Okay, and
Yeah.
then
I'm sorry, can I tag on that? Fixed at what amount?
I have to go back into, I don't have the
Okay, you
exhibit
can-
with
Yeah,
me.
I don't recall the amount.
I want to say it's 4 or 5 cents, 4 cents, 5 cents a kilowatt hour. We can answer that question.
So
And-
about half.
at the
Yeah,
age-
about half, right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And then the last one, I think let me check through here, I put a little star by it. Oh, and then on the PPA rate is locked in at .779 for the whole 25 years.
Correct.
So if, it's kind of like locking in your mortgage, if the rates
Yeah.
go way up or the rates go way down, we just get what we get. We know
You
that
know,
that's what we'll
it's
be
a hedging
at.
strategy, yes. Mhm.
Okay, and then a tag to that on, is it set, is you mentioned that the size of the units or the number of panels had been smaller because they were more efficient now?
Correct.
So that means, let's say we thought we were going to put in 1,000, but we only need 800 to produce. So as we move forward as a district, if we were to build something that needed another account that needs electricity, can we add panels as long as you can consume it? So we have room to grow.
Yes, so we'd have to figure out where those panels would be located. But the power purchase agreement does provide for, the district's future changes. In that case, you would be adding panels if those panels could actually be sited at the existing locations.
And it doesn't, are we, I'm so sorry, the total that you said we are bound to right now, we could only produce this much because this is what we're consuming?
Under a net
Correctly?
metering arrangement,
Right now.
correct.
So 3 years from now, if it turns out Meadowlark is using a lot more, can we can add, but we can't, or it uses less, do we lose it? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, so that's, I was referring to that in the risks section. So if, and let's use Meadowlark for an example. Meadowlark is currently the largest of the 11 benefiting accounts for that RES-BCT tariff arrangement. If that were to go substantially lower than its current consumption, then in the year that it drops off, the system, assuming the system is still producing its, requisite amount of energy, you'd accumulate a lot more bill credits than you would be able to allocate them across other accounts. So in that year, you may end up having a negative cash flow associated with the system. But you can, as I mentioned before, change the account configuration. The allocation on an annual basis. So, and assuming that you had other accounts that would make up the difference in a substantial drop-off in the largest one, then in fact,
You're
the
okay.
next year, you'd be okay. Yeah.
Okay. And then the last question I have, it's really a silly question, but you say these have gone, the ballast to hold these have gone through a wind test? Did you
Yeah,
say that? So
they're- well, they're
we
desi-
know when the Santa Anas come and surprise us at 100 miles an hour,
Yeah.
they're not going to blow off.
Yeah,
blow over,
exactly. Yeah,
Or
so
whatever.
they're designed to a specific wind zone rating. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
On the high end of wind, in that zone?
Yeah, so we can specify something beyond what the wind maps and the reference information would indicate.
So it's like we can say you choose an area and you develop it with knowing that you have to accommodate a 100-year flood.
Right.
So the wind zone is the same thing, you're
Right.
accommodating. Okay.
Exactly.
Thank
Yeah, in
you.
this case, I believe it's 100 miles an hour, 110 miles an hour.
Okay, thank you.
And if you were to knock down a few of those, not our problem.
Correct,
And we
correct.
still get credit for what they should be doing
Yeah, so
at half rate.
they're responsible under the terms and conditions for insurance. You know, obviously, it's their property, they have property insurance. If there were an act of God situation that knocked out some or all of the system, they would be responsible for, putting it back together as soon as possible.
And we'd be receiving compensation from them at approximately 50%.
Yeah, it would depend on how long that period of time that it was down were to drag on, yeah. And if that amount of outage were to cause a violation of the performance guarantee.
Thank you. Thank you, Betty. Jim Hernandez.
Thank you. I have a number of questions.
Sure.
Based on something that has just happened to us recently, I heard that we have an operational guarantee, that we have a shutdown and guarantee and a performance guarantee, but it was kind of tied into the last question. If there is a shutdown and a repair is there a specific time period
Yep.
with which after that, because we're only receiving about half of, if there's a shutdown and performance is less, we're only receiving half that credit. Is there a time period where we go, hey, we got to get full credit for what's going on here? Do we have that in the contract?
Yeah, so and I can't recall what the period of time is, I'd have to go back and look at the contract, but there's a period of time which is allowed for, on an annual basis, regular maintenance, where the system is by definition during that maintenance is going to be down. So that's allowed, down period or outage period. And then there's language in the PPA that addresses the response time. So if there's something that causes the system to go down, first of all, they're required to respond to that within 48 hours. And then there's other terms and conditions that define how long they have to, fix whatever problems there are with respect to the overall period of time that the system is down.
All right. The energy storage, you say you looked at that, but it didn't make any sense. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure, absolutely. At the time we did the analysis, the cost of the battery systems and the available incentives, these are state incentives that are regulated by the PUC and managed by the CEC, were not as robust as they are today. Or, let me take that back, not as robust as they may be in the near future, okay? So there was a recent decision by the PUC in late September, just literally a month ago, that is going to make, under certain cases, battery energy storage systems much more cost-effective than they have been in the past. And so we will continue to advise the district on eligibility for those incentives that are much richer than they have been, which may make an assessment or a new feasibility associated with looking at those batteries, something that the district should consider.
And if we do, what does that do to the main body of the contract? I mean, are we going to have to renegotiate everything?
No, and when adding batteries to an existing system that is owned by a third party, those batteries would have to be owned by the district. So these would be your own system. They would be interconnected to the switchgear where the solar panels are interconnected, but they would have no impact on the operation of the solar.
And I believe the agreement allows for that.
Yeah.
What's that?
The
Yeah,
agreement
allows it.
specifically allows for the district to do that.
Right, but there's two scenarios here, if I understood correctly. Lift station 1, that's the power being used by the lift station only. If we make more power, we don't get any benefit. Is that right?
Under the net metering agreement, you mean? Yeah. So if you produce more energy than you consume on an annual basis, there's what we would call lost credit. Okay? So you would.
If you use more than you produce, there's lost credit. Is that what I heard you say?
Right.
But if you produce more than you use, that's plus credit.
Yeah, so in that scenario, if you produce more than you use, those credits above and beyond what you used are given up.
Are given up.
Yeah.
So it makes no sense. I mean,
Well-
for batteries, because, I mean, you put in batteries, yes, James?
So basically, the main reason at lift station 1 for batteries would be time of use. We could actually modify the system to collect energy that's produced or fill the batteries up during off-peak periods. And then when we have higher demands, because we have to pump, and we have to pump at lift station 1 because it's a sewer lift station, actually discharge from the battery. So there is actually a business case for lift station 1 in the future to add batteries to mainly stay off the peak energy charges, which is really the most expensive part, because the commodity, the actual production of energy, is relatively cheap compared to the tariffs that are added to it.
Yeah, the other benefit is that in the case that you were just citing, if there were a situation where the consumption at LS1 were to drop off, maybe it's a wet year or whatnot, then if there were a battery installed there, that energy could be used for the battery and would have benefits to the district without having to give up credit, NEM credit for the solar.
Okay. How many accounts do we have? I mean, we talked this 11, but if something happens, we could go, I don't know how many other accounts we have.
Kevin, you could probably answer both questions, but I think you could add up to 50 accounts to the resident.
Yeah, so there's a limit on how many accounts you can have under the RSPCT tariff. It's a total of 50.
50?
At any given time, you can have no more than 50.
Well,
which is quite a number.
Yeah.
Not only because it's a big number, but also because you have to administrate that, on an annual basis and keep track of it.
And is every account a meter, or is it?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
so
yeah.
do we have anywhere near 50 meters in the district?
Yeah, you have more than 50. You have,
Oh, we do?
I think approaching 70.
Whoa.
Yeah. Now, a lot of them are very low use.
Yeah.
Very, very low use. So, I mean, there's probably maybe 25 that might be reasonable candidates for this type of tariff arrangement.
And we've looked at whatever the production is, that the 11 accounts that you're identified will take into that consumption.
Yeah, the 11 that were identified and that are part of the allocation currently were selected based on basically two criteria. One is their overall consumption, and the other was the time of use rate that they were on. Because each rate has its own cost structure, as James just mentioned, and we want to make sure that those accounts that are going to be receiving bill credit are going to get the greatest benefit by a reduction in their monthly billing costs from that, and that's based on the rate that they're on.
Just two more questions. At LS1, adding additional panels, if I just heard correctly, it wouldn't make much sense because we can only utilize the power that LS1 is utilizing, so that doesn't make much sense, okay. And the last question, I bumped into someone at the city, and I don't know, I mentioned that the LS1 would be required to do a site development review plan. Did we find that out? Is that going to be the case?
Yes, one of the mitigating negative debt comments that we received from the city is they would require us to do a site development plan. And it is actually already, my understanding is already in the PCI's plan to get basically go through a permit process through the city. And we've also talked to them about it.
And that was the concern that I had. I don't know if they're taking this as a different project than a standard site development, because the standard site development requires landscaping, enlarged entry, walls, and all the rest, which in my calculation here could be well over $200,000 worth of stuff.
Yeah, and I can't really answer that question directly. Our brief conversation with city staff said that we're not constructing a zone facility like a commercial facility or anything to that, or residential. So the site development plan is more addressing what we are developing, which is solar panels on site. And the city just wants to make sure that they have a right to comment on it.
Well, the two items that were brought to my attention were landscaping and walls. The city doesn't want to see these panels, and they don't want the neighbors to see these panels. Assuming that it's a 6-foot wall only partially around around the facility, that could be as much as $70,000, because the city's not going to let us put up a chain link fence. We know that, and it's going to have to be a decorative wall, and so that's a big expense that I think is important to find out. We're only making $1,900 a month on this thing. We have to spend lots of money on walls and a little landscaping or enhanced entry. That doesn't make any sense for LS1.
And Director Harris, you're right. Our conversation with the city was they don't want to be able to see from the road. They don't realize that it's a ballast system that's low to the ground, and they will consider putting privacy slats within the chain link,
Right.
which is already fenced in. However, that's not a guarantee. They didn't put that in writing, but that's a consideration.
Well, they told you that.
It's a consideration. I'm not going to get it in writing yet. So.
Well, Jim, I must mention that they have that across the street, the AM, PM, all that property back there. It's all chain link and it's all slanted.
Oh, yeah, that's temporary. That's temporary.
Not
use.
temporary.
The hell, if they're going to do something there. But again, that's
someday.
the possibility.
Sure.
But I think we should put a nail in that coffin so that we don't get hooked like we did on the desal pipe. I mean, that's a leverage that we need to undo because of the small amount of monies we're going to be receiving. And that's all I'm saying about that. And with that, I think I have all my questions.
I have a question. How much is LS1? How much are we looking at savings in electric cost?
19 something a month.
So on an annual basis,
Yeah.
in the first year, you're looking at, again, depending on the system size, if we go with the 236 KW system, it'd be a little over $30,000 first year. And then over a 25-year period, which includes system degradation, you're looking at just a little less than $1 million.
Well, I think Director Hanna is 100% correct. We have to look at what it's going to cost us potentially. I'm thinking it won't because we're not on the road frontage. It's behind our lift station. It's not bounded by anything. But you need to check it out before the 6th, because that's something we need to know if we're going to have added costs or not. Okay. Any other questions from this gentleman? No? And then I guess we're going to go to you.
We have a speaker, huh?
I know. Well, I was going to finish the staff presentation, though.
No, so from a staff point, this is just a presentation for information for the board workshop prior to our meeting on the 6th. One of the things I heard today, and I want to clarify, was there's several questions about kind of the guarantees that are associated, and the guarantees aren't a point-by-point guarantee for lack of production because there's a rolling time window. So in other words, they can be down but they could also make up for it with further maintenance and helping to make sure dust stays off those panels and producing. And it's up to the provider to actually analyze that. So they can be down, whether it's act of God or because of something happened on site, and come back and make up for it. So there's a rolling window. So a single event, even if it's a significant event, doesn't necessarily trigger the contract for reimbursement back to the district.
How do they make up for it, I guess is my question. I don't understand.
So I've gone through a learning experience, and Kevin knows this way better than I can, is they assume a certain amount of risk, and they also assume a certain amount of maintenance response. So if they're down for, let's say, an unforeseen period for some reason, they come out and increase the cleaning of the panels, monthly if they have to, which will increase the productivity and the efficiency of those panels. Right now, they're on contract for 2 cleanings a year.
Correct.
By contract, but obviously they could do more if they want. And there's different, management strategies that they have that they can help really maximize the efficiencies of the panels.
And if I could add to that, most arrangements like this, the provider doesn't rely on 100% production of the system. They may say, let's assume it runs at 90%. And if it runs below that 90%, then hopefully there's other times of the year where it runs above it and it can make up for lost time. It's very similar to what they do in the D-cell project, that it can actually produce more than it's contractually obligated to deliver.
And they could do maintenance at night and not really bother us at all.
Sure.
Right.
Okay, but you're talking about $250,000 a year in savings. This is the low end of what we're looking at.
Right.
It's $23,000 a month, right? Okay.
So, if I may, before the speaker comes up, I hope this was helpful. The point, there's a lot of information here and a lot of great questions, and that's why we wanted to do it before the board meeting, when the item was actually considered. When this comes in front of the board on November 6th, it'll probably be an abbreviated version of this, but we're going to focus on the items that were brought up today that need further explanation, such as the site development plan, any
One other question
requirements.
for you.
Sure.
What would happen if the board chose to bifurcate this and just go with Twin Oaks and not go with LS1?
Yeah.
What does that do?
We explored that in the negotiation with the provider. Clearly, because the Twin Oaks site is more valuable to them because it's larger, produces more energy, bigger tax credit, all of that sort of thing. They would allow removing the LS1 project from the contract, but not the other way around.
Oh, right.
Yeah, right.
So all the numbers would stay the same as we see them right now?
Correct. The PPA rate would be held at what you see there for, you'd end up just having a single site PPA for that amount.
Okay, so nothing changes, we don't get the benefit of $250,000 a
I
year?
mean, the contract would change in terms of its exhibits and whatnot, but the terms and conditions would not change.
Right, the monetary value of Twin Oaks stays the same as we see here?
Correct, correct.
Okay. Now we have a speaker. Mr. Hunsaker.
Mike Hunsaker, Twin Oaks Valley Property Owner Association. I'd like to congratulate the consultant. I think that is by far the clearest and most detailed analysis I have seen. I've got one question for staff, and that is, we have various maintenance issues with reservoirs from time to time. And the problems that occur in the ceiling where it's just moist air versus under the water where there's water and erosion are two different things. Will we have enough access to do repairs on the reservoir if we need to do something fairly major? Or is it advisable to put some access in the future for that? The other issue I wanted to get a clarification on, though, is from the consultant, is to how the credit is occurred. 80% of the cost of power is related to distribution, not to the energy cost. Or are we talking about just the power component, or is there a distribution credit that comes in here? One of the things that I heard tonight that I had, this afternoon, that I hadn't heard before was the REC. And the fact that these credits are now substantial and are increasing dramatically. Who gets the benefit of those credits? Do we get the benefits, or do they all accrue to the provider? Maybe some credit splitting process would be fair to all parties. And as far as the TOU, I assume what he's grandfathering in is the 4 to 9, because if we're grandfathering in the noon to 9 or noon to 6 or something, that is not exactly an advantage. Just a clarification. Thank you.
So I think I'll be able to answer most of Mr. Hunsaker's questions, and Kevin, if I'm wrong, please step in or add to it. First question, so we work directly with our operations staff to make sure that there's access to all ports and hatches for reservoir maintenance. Also, these aren't steel reservoirs or concrete, so we don't have degradation of steel or anything to that effect on this to worry about. However, that being said, we still need access. So that's why you see within the reservoirs these spaces. And I don't remember what the lane widths are, but they're quite wide, enough for us to get a vehicle down between 12 feet. Thank you. 12 feet between. So that's enough for us to get equipment down each one of these rows. So we took that into consideration. Mr. Hunsaker's second question on Twin Oaks, the commodity, just the energy, is what you get with the RESBIT projects. The NEM projects, you get the full credit for with the distribution charges and everything. Is that correct, Kevin?
Yeah, the way that the RSBCT tariff works is that the credit is based on the energy generation cost component of the rate at that location. So there's currently a meter there. I believe it's a pumping load. That's the meter that is used as a reference point to define what the bill credit value is going to be, or the multiplier for the bit.
So that was
credit.
taken into consideration with these savings. So these are just delta numbers. So that we still get a bill at the site and at our other sites that we still have to pay SCG&E. These will just be the projected savings compared to what we pay without the RESBIT project. Next question, the credits, I believe those goes to the district. Oh.
Yeah, so what you see there for that line item under the REC value, that represents our best guess over a 25-year period what the district would see if they decided to sell the RECs in the California voluntary market.
And then the last thing, the TOU from 12 to 6 is the grandfathering, so we're grandfathered into 2027 for the 12 to 6 TOU, and that's more benefiting towards us because that is a more peak power production on a solar panel. So if it's a higher rate during 12 to 6, we're actually producing more energy and consuming less energy, especially in our NEM site directly, where we get the full benefit on that. But even on our other side, it's still, I guess the numbers are just better that way.
Yeah, especially for export, the 12 to 6 being defined as peak means peak rate as well. 4 to 9 p.m. Being the peak is less valuable in terms of solar production because of the cost difference. Currently and into the foreseeable future. Yeah.
Okay, answered all the questions. Directors, any other questions that we have at this time? I think we've completed number 1.
Could we take a break before 2?
Sure.
Thank you.
You want to take a break
5
now?
minutes?
Yeah, 5 minutes?
Perfect.
5 minutes. 5-minute break? We'll now call the meeting back to order. And we're going to be uses for lift station number 1 property. Mr. General Manager.
Yeah, I'll take that. So thank you for holding all your questions related to alternative uses for lift station 1 in the first item. So this item is on the agenda because it has come to my attention that there's been other uses proposed. So maybe we can just spend a few minutes and talk about the Lift Station 1 site. So this is just an aerial photograph to orient you. Kind of right at the middle, the picture is the intersection of Discovery and San Marcos Boulevard. And then if you just move a little, that's our site. That's the Lift Station 1 site highlighted right there. So we'll just zoom in a little closer. This is the site. You can see it's just to the east of the Rock Church and to the west of some of that commercial buildings over there, just north of San Marcos Boulevard. So it's about a 3-acre site. It's currently zoned MU3, which is a mixed-use zoning, but does not allow residential uses. It allows commercial, industrial, and office uses. Currently used for the lift station site, which is used to divert flows, sewer flows, from the main sewer outfall that goes to the Encina. We can divert the flows to Meadowlark for conversion into recycled water, and that's the purpose of the LS1 site. We also have chemical storage and injection equipment on the site, not just the lift station itself. There's a grit dewatering area, and there's an aerial I'll show you in a second where those are. And there's valves we call the Waterman valves, which are how you turn the valves to make sure that you can divert the flows. There's a paved area so that we ensure all-weather access at the site. And we've recently, about in the last year or so, we've done some enhanced landscaping to be a better neighbor to the community. So this is a close-up of the actual, I'll call it the developed portion of the site. I don't know if my mouse does work here. So this is this building right here houses all the pump equipment, the motors, the wet well, all of that. To the north of that, there's some chemical storage tanks. This is so the odor control chemicals that we have that we inject into the line are there. To the west side, there's a grit dewatering. So materials that are removed from the wet well are placed there to dewater so that they're cheaper and easier to transport for ultimate disposal. And then all the valving is right along San Marcos Boulevard. You can see it as you drive by. There's some above-ground appurtenances that the questions have been asked before. What are those? Well, that's the stuff that the staff has to activate if they want to divert flows. So, questions?
I'm sorry, go back. They have to deactivate the glass things that are there? I don't understand.
James can.
So basically, those are just, they're plastic and they're just the risers. There's a steel basically bar that's grooved, and basically it travels to open the gates and lower the gates. So what you see is the top of the valve is basically the valve itself is underneath in a vault, and those are just part of the basically the center pin or the stem that raises or lowers the gate.
The plastic part that you see is just an environmental cover, so you don't get dust and grit in the greased.
My question is, why is it a glass cover instead of just a metal casing? I mean, it looks like you're supposed to look in it for a reason.
Yeah, to see where the stem is.
Yeah, where is it? You can tell visually, is it fully
Tell if
open,
it's
fully
open.
closed?
You can drive by and see.
Tell if it's open or closed.
Yep,
For years, I thought I was just telling you the level.
It's real high-tech.
yeah. Yeah. If you ever see liquid rising in there, there's a problem. It's just to see whether the shaft is up or down.
I just said it's a kind of Fred Flintstone kind of setup for today's day and age. It should be something that works a little classier.
Okay, so other potential uses that have been proposed from time to time for LS1 site is a solar photovoltaic, which we discussed today. Septage receiving facility is at a place where septage hauling companies can come drop things off so they can get injected into the wastewater collection system. Commercial industrial development potential based on zoning either today or in the future. We've talked about it maybe being a component for a potable reuse site. So for example, if we wanted to convert wastewater and recycled water produced at Meadowlark to convert it into potable reuse, it doesn't have to occur at Meadowlark. You can transport that partially treated water to another offsite location, and this is a potential site. We've also talked about wastewater flow attenuation, and that would be for the purpose of maybe delaying or minimizing the expansion in downstream sewer pipe sizes. So for example, you could build underground storage and the peak flows could be held there until the peak recedes, and then they could be put back into the site. That doesn't seem to be an attractive location or attractive use because it's probably more expensive to do that than to just downsize or upsize the downstream facilities. So some considerations for the board as we have a discussion today is you may want to use as a PPA site, if you use it as a PPA site, a power purchase agreement site, it will encumber the property until the first buyout. And as you heard Kevin mention, the first buyout is in 10 years if we use that LS1 as a PPA site. The current zoning for the site does not seem to create any unique opportunities. As you all are aware, there's a lot of similarly zoned properties along San Marcos Boulevard that are vacant. If this was incredibly valuable land, it probably wouldn't be sitting vacant. Potable reuse, direct potable reuse is probably at least 10 years away anyway before the regulations are promulgated and you go through the design and permitting and construction phase. So I don't think entering into a power purchase agreement would preclude future uses for that. And as I mentioned before, the cost for flow attenuation may be greater than the cost upsize downstream facilities. So the recommendation at this point in time, this is going to be a really brief presentation for me and mostly want to hear from the board. I think we should go forward with the power purchase agreement. You did hear from the consultant today that you can bifurcate. You can go forward with the power purchase agreement at Twin Oaks Reservoir Site only, if you wanted to. We have an opportunity in front of us to discuss zoning. The city's in the middle of their general plan update process. We have a representative and an alternate on that property, or on that committee, and we may want to look at what zoning we'd like to see and what potential uses we may see for this and have it zoned accordingly. And we may want to identify and explore other potential uses prior to that first power purchase agreement buyout so that we would be positioned to do something different in a more informed manner when that first off-ramp comes. And again, the second off-ramp would be at 20 years, and then the last off-ramp is at the expiration of the power purchase agreement, which would be 25 years from commercial operation. So that's all I had, and I just would like to turn it over to the board. And one of the reasons I put this on there is I'm trying to streamline the conversation on the meeting on November 6th. So I want to make sure we had this more in-depth conversation here, and hopefully we're more focused on November 6th. So with that, I'll turn it over to the president.
I have a question. The buyout in 10 years, we didn't ask him because I didn't even know that was a possibility. I would have asked him if I had known what you were going to do. How much is it? What's the buyout?
The answer is we don't know, and the answer is we don't know, and the IRS won't let you include that in a power purchase agreement. What you can do is agree on a methodology, and typically what you do is you say, we'll have it appraised at the buyout time, and it is what it is. You get some appraisal service, they go through and do an appraisal, both parties agree, and that's the amount.
Right, but I, making that decision, don't know whether it's going to be worth $10 or $25 million. He does know approximately what it's going to be worth in 10 years. He can give us an idea.
Yeah, but at this
Can't
point in
put
time.
in the agreement, but
Right.
it's an idea.
But true, and you don't need to know right now, when the first off-ramp occurs at 10 years, you'll get an appraisal, and then you'll make a decision at that time whether you want to exercise the off-ramp. You're not committed to buying it at 10 years. It's an opportunity if you choose to.
Yeah, I understand. I guess what I'm saying is that I just, an interim, looking at it potentially as an interim period, does that make sense? The interim 10 years, we lease it, and then we have the option of buying it at the end of 10. Does that make dollars and cents? Or just leave it empty? Because if for 10 years, you're only going to take in, I forget what the number was, is that worth what the payout could be?
250.
Yeah, it'll be about $250,000 over that 10-year period. I think it was around
And
$23,000.
what could it cost us to buy it out? Could it be $250,000 or more? Then it would be a dumb thing to do.
Well, you
Put that in interim.
no, but you couldn't buy it out now. You'd have to wait till the 10th year. So you would have gotten that $250,000 for 10 years, and then at the end of 10, then you can decide whether you want to buy it out.
Right.
I don't think I'm addressing your question.
No, I hear what you're saying, but I'm saying 10 years down the road, let's assume we get there and we have to buy it out. It's going to cost us $250,000 to buy it out.
You never have to buy it out.
Well, if you want to
But
use
if
a
you
different
chose
use.
to.
If the board wants to make a different use of it.
Right.
Okay, if they have to spend $250,000 or more, it was a waste of time putting it in there.
And that's a factor that the board would need to consider.
Well, that's why I wanted to get some idea of what something like this could be worth. And it's not gonna be exact, I
Right.
know that, but an idea.
Okay, we'll put down a note that on November 6th, before November 6th, we'll try to get an idea of what we think it would be.
Yeah, the economy could fall, could go up, I mean, who knows, a lot of, but,
It took us a year and a half just to get to this point, so.
yeah,
10 years will be here before you know it.
that's lightning speed for us. That's lightning speed.
It's ensuing 15 years.
And just to clarify, when I tried to kind of get an estimate on buyout prices from Kevin Ross, what he said is it's fair market value. So if solar installations are all of a sudden valued really high, for example, the REC credits that you get from it go through the roof, then the value of that project is even greater. So if, let's say the REC values quadruple, go up 10 times the value because greenhouse gas emissions, different laws that are in place,
Right.
especially here in California, that value is not a straight depreciation value. So he was very uncomfortable giving me a number because those would all be basically in the financial, when he analyzes it, those will all be considerations, at that time. So if there are no REC values and it's a straight line depreciation, that's something that he could do. But from a fair market value, he said that he's very uncomfortable because the number
You
could
don't know
be
where the
off.
market's gonna go.
Yeah, he could be off by factors.
Okay.
So,
Thank you, I appreciate it, thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, if you just take a building depreciation over the life, they just, it's whatever the value it is divided by the number of years, and that's what it depreciates per year. And so, I mean, I don't know if that has any applicability to solar because of what you just said, if the,
But the
those
property might
credits.
have valued by twice.
Exactly.
You could have bought it for $1 million, now it's worth $3 million. You
And
appreciated $1 million,
you gotta pay two.
so you can't.
Yeah. I do have, so, may I?
Certainly, go right ahead, Director.
Well, the two adages of real estate are location, 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 and highest and best use. My concern, having now know that the MU3, which I didn't realize had industrial, I just looked at it the other day, I didn't believe industrial was there, I thought it was commercial and offices, which when we did the last general plan, everyone thought MU3 made no sense in this particular area. But MU2, which could be one of the zones that we look at in the general plan, does allow for residential, because that potentially could be a benefit. Don't care one way or the other where we go, but my concern is, we just had at Encina, a company come to us that was just gonna store cars on 1 acre, and they were gonna give us $5,000 a month. This, even at the highest rate, this $2,500, almost 20, well, it's 25 something, less than 25.50, is a pretty thin return on what we might be able to do. And I'm suggesting that perhaps by virtue now, we know we could bifurcate this, that perhaps we should put a little energy into doing as Encina has done, having our land consultant talk to some realtors to see if there isn't another temporary use or use that is going to bring us more bang for our buck. Because anywhere from $1,900 to $2,500 is a pittance of what we have as a budget. So I was a little bit shocked and I guess disappointed that it doesn't really give us that much benefit for the acreage that is being used.
Anything else? That it?
That's it.
Anyone else? Okay, I have a question. Could you go back to the map to show us where the property is? Yeah. Now, I'm not sure. I know what the old plant there, Marconi building. Marconi is MU2, I think, is it not?
Three.
Industrial?
3,
MU3.
Yep.
It's MU3, it's the same. Okay, so that's the same, that's consistent. And we go to the other side where we have commercial Yeah, and that's probably MU3 as well.
Yep.
And then we go to the back where we have storage, and that's probably MU3 as well. So why would a general plan committee want to change its designation when it fits in with the surrounding area? And the idea of changing the general plan is to change it to make it run smoothly. You don't go from industrial to housing. You know, you just don't do that. There's steps you take. And I don't see that being changed here, but that's just me. I mean, give me a reason for that, Jim. I don't know. It's a whole committee of 20-some-odd people.
I think that there is a move from property owners that own the MU3 to change that to a wider use, such as MU2, because just down the street where the Sears building is,
Yeah?
that is, I believe, an MU2.
No, that's MU3. The whole thing is, and that whole thing, Restaurant Row, is all up for sale under MU3. It's on the market.
It was my understanding different, but maybe you have more current information. But,
I saw the listing.
okay, the point is that the potential of residential in the area would make a great deal of sense, because we have more commercial than I mean, lots of the commercial that's out there presently is not being fully leased, and the amount is overwhelming, and they're gonna be changing that, I'm sure. I'm not too concerned one way or the other. My more initial concern is with the amount of money that is being proposed, is that what we believe is going to be the highest and best use for a return on the property?
That's a good question. In my mind, I'm thinking, when you look at the piece of property, you can't put apartments in there. It just doesn't make any sense at all to put it in the middle of, in light industrial, commercial. There's no reason, nothing around that that's going to change at all. And number two, much like Ewa with their piece of property, I mean, they're looking at getting, for 2 acres, $80,000 a month.
Yeah.
Potentially. That's only potentially, because now, once they have an agreement, they have to look and see, does that area have the infrastructure necessary for the battery packs? Because this property is perfect to put battery packs in, but there's no infrastructure. Closest infrastructure is by Mike's house in the Laurels. To have that kind of line to come in here to accept that power and to put it back on again. So the cost of that would be outrageous. But that would be a great use for it, but they're not going to do it.
Well, that's why I mentioned the other proposal that is before you, Encina, which is the car storage, which is $5,000 a month.
Right, but we don't have any dealership. I mean, just looking at, okay, the reality is we don't have any dealerships in San Marcos.
And
they could find this property other places that would be more suitable. For instance, the AM/PM.
the only thing we don't know is what else is out there.
Oh, yeah, and we won't.
And we won't,
Until it happens.
if we do not bifurcate the two contracts, then we're gonna be 10 years with the panels, which personally, I think is not enough revenue generated to hold up the property for 10 years.
I hear you.
That's my opinion.
No, and it's a good opinion. I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying the same, I guess we probably owned this piece of property for 30 years, and we've generated zero.
And
Do we
I don't know
wanna
how many years
do we wanna
it's been
continue
available to
doing that?
develop because of the hazardous material on there. That was, if you recall, that was the holdup for many of those 30 years.
But still, the board didn't choose to do anything with it because it could be
Well, they couldn't because of
future
the,
potential use.
they couldn't because of the hazardous waste.
Well, two good trains of thought. Do we have any other speakers on this item?
I had, oh, go ahead.
Yes, go ahead.
Just a question, and a lot of people in the room probably could answer this really easily, but for me, I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around it. I could visualize that if we did the solar project, that the current access point that we have for our service vehicles would probably accommodate the service vehicles that are needed to service the panels. If we did some other use that was either storing cars, which would be a lot of cars and car carriers coming and going, or something that we don't even know of yet that would require public access to this spot, is this little strip of land that's right here to the far right, is that enough room to be able to create a public access point? Because I don't think we would probably use our current access point for that. So does anybody even know if that's even possible?
Well, there's room for that.
But isn't that kind of like a,
It's a
maybe
drain.
you could fill
it's
it
a
in and
drainage.
stuff. Yeah, it's drainage, right?
It's a drainage, so it's a low spot, so there's a drainage that goes, if you go to the previous, if there's drainage that basically comes along the site and runs down this whole corridor. It doesn't mean it can't get improved, which just takes effort, but right now, it's a swale, it's a big wide swale, for the most part.
But it's possible though.
Yeah.
All right.
Does that, and that's an interesting question there, because I forgot about that, the swale. Is that going to impede them putting in their equipment?
No, for the solar project, the flat area, which is kind of roughly here, they're taking roughly 80% of this area, maybe 75% of this flat area. So they went out there on site visit and saw where this was, and then lined up their panels accordingly.
It looks like all that property drains to that, to your peaks.
Yeah,
'Cause
so,
there's a flow, right?
yeah, it
right
comes
there.
through here. It comes through here, drains out, and I mean, it's dry most of the year, but during wet events, it all drains here. And this used to be a Superfund site, because the chemical manufacturer here used to sheet flow across the property here. And just to answer the previous question, Mr. Gertis was still here his last year when they finally got released. So you couldn't do anything with that site until it got released, which was roughly 5 years ago.
And the only, well, and you checked this out before the 6th, but the only fence that you see necessary would be across the back of our property to go straight across.
Yeah, this is actually a big wall right here.
Right, yeah, that side and the other
yeah.
side, you don't need anything.
And this here, this
It's already
also is a
fenced.
big wall, but we do have chain link that goes along the whole
Right.
perimeter. We have wrought iron in front because it looks better, but we have
Right.
black chain link, I believe, that goes across the perimeter.
So the fence you'd be asking the city if that's just permissible is just across the back of where we have our lift station.
Yeah, and I can't put words in the city's mouth, but this is what would seem reasonable to me as far as, proving some privacy slots.
Right. Yeah, because the rest is far off. All right.
And so now, there's a September date that's out there, so if we do separate these two projects and study this one for other potential uses, are we gonna lose, is there a time frame by which we would have to do that by in order to be able to still do this?
Yes, but I don't know what that date would be. And I don't know how much float or slack they have in their schedule to allow our agency to deliberate any further on whether we want to move forward on that site or not.
Is that something maybe we can find out?
We can ask them.
You know, and there again, listening to the things that you said were possibilities, Glenn, I looked at the possibility that maybe we just really need to use this as a passive site. Not to actually build on it or do anything with it, because with the swale in there, with the questions in there, with the time frame that we may be able to use this property in the future for something we need, I don't know that we should lock ourselves into not doing something temporarily. But that's just my thought. And I believe Director Evans.
Thank you. Well, I know we've looked at this for a long time, and it seems like we looked at all these options, and I appreciate Jim saying someone wants to store cars for $5,000 a month. That's more than it would make as a solar, but I'm not sure they're going to commit to 10 years at $5,000. I think that's a gamble to wait. I like the idea of the solar. If it was incredibly expensive at the end of 10 years, we probably cost a lot to buy it out. We wouldn't. If it was worth nothing, we could and destroy it. I think we have options. we did use this property for trucks parking and stuff, haven't we before? Didn't we do that, Jim, at one point? Somebody wanted to put their construction vehicles on it?
Construction.
Yeah, we use this project for both ourselves and our capital project for staging, storage of equipment, but there's no permit use, and that's case by case.
Okay. So I feel this is set for so long and we've waited so long, I think it's been well-researched, and I feel I would rather not bifurcate the things. I'd like to go with it. I know if 250,000 sounds like a lot of money to me, rather than nothing. And I just want to clarify, we're not committing money to build these sites, is that correct? Or-
Correct. No money out of the district's pocket.
So if I can get $2,500 a month, not a big risk, for 10 years, at no expense, I feel it's foolish to wait. That's just one opinion.
Yeah, I'm not going to be at the next meeting, so I'll just kind of chime in now. I agree with Director Evans. I am intrigued by Director Hernandez's thought process as to, you want to get the most out of the property, but I think given all the circumstances and what it might take to do something else, and we've learned through a number of processes. This one has taken 1.5 years so far, and we're still a ways away. And there's other projects that we've been discussing now since almost the time that I've been on the board for, I don't know what it is, 5-6 years now. And so we could probably get this thing going with the solar panels and still study what we might want to do for 10, 15, 20 years down the road as a more longer term plan. And I suspect as this part of the city, not just this specific part, but the entire stretch of San Marcos Boulevard is going to evolve over that same period of time pretty significantly. We'll know a lot more 10, 15 years from now, but for right now, we should go grab some, or put this land to work for our customers. So since I'm not going to be here at the next meeting, I'll just say just one board member's opinion. I support the solar project in general, and I support moving forward and keeping them both together.
Director Elithar?
Yeah, I don't support bifurcating the solar project as proposed at this point in time. I mean, unless somebody came knocking at the door with some hot project that, that was a quote sure thing, that might change my mind, but at this point, we've studied this for quite a while, and I think we should go forward with the project as proposed. I had some experience being on the board at EWA, and, that 27-acre quote south parcel there, that they bickered over the use of that extremely valuable property for over 20 years and never put a darn thing on that site. And I just cringe at the amount of money that could have been made over that time period. So you can wait and study, but I think there comes a time just do something. And to the point Director Sinella made, in the interim, we can study some other use if it comes up. And 10 years goes by pretty quickly. So.
Okay, couple of points is, as I said, I don't really see the general plan changing this piece of property. I don't see it making sense to anybody. However, if I was directed to help with that, I certainly would, but it just doesn't make sense. Why would they change it? Everything around it is the same. The other thing is, someone brought up the fact about the lift station having to be moved at some point in time for the road widening. If and when that day and time comes, and the city tells us we have to move it, the city pays for it, we don't. If we choose to do it before then, we pay for it, the city doesn't. And I know that's gonna be quite an expensive proposition if that point in time comes. Why would we wanna pay for that? So I just don't see it. My personal opinion is, I'd like to see it stay a passive use with the possibility of in 10 years, who knows what the board will want to do, but they'll have an option in 10 years if, direct, indirect, or any of that, it could be used and we still have the property. So, and in the meantime, we've gotten some monies for it. So that's my point of view. Anyone, anything else to say? Yes?
I was going to say, so this is very similar to the first item. We're not looking for direction or a vote or anything now. We just want to have a conversation to help us better prepare for the meeting on the 6th.
Okay. Do we have any speakers? Yes, we do. We have one more speaker. Thank you very much. Mr. Hunsaker. I'm sorry, I almost missed that.
No,
Again.
you didn't miss it.
I almost did.
Okay. I would like some clarification on the REC value and the buyout option. I think that that will be a major component that may make things, doing much of anything in the future, a question. Hernandez's question about the fencing and such, I think, is germane, and that calls for bifurcation. Third option is we're going to go with Creekside, and it's going to come very quickly. And there's very little parking. It's been on the back burner for a long time, but it can't wait much longer. There's going to be a massive need for parking for all these apartments, because the builders don't want to build parking. And we've had a lot of problems in Lake San Marcos just from student parking issues. I think this is a very good site for a major parking structure. And I think if before anything is done that we can't undo for 10 years, we need a lot more coordination with the city as to where they want to do some planning and what they're going to do with parking and other potential uses. The REC is a major concern to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to add to that, I believe there are provisions in the power purchase agreement that would allow for the relocation of the facilities at the district's cost, as long as they don't impact the amount of production. So for example, if 5 years down the road, somebody wanted to build a parking structure, as long as they put all the similar number of panels on top of the parking structure, that wouldn't trigger the need to have to do a buyout, but it would allow us to continue make both uses. So,
Well, a personal opinion on that, when it comes to, the city owns an enormous amount of that property over there. They have more than enough room to adequately put in the parking that they possibly need. So, anyone else?
Yeah.
No? With that?
Yeah, I just want to say, because Director Hernandez did bring up a good point earlier. As you guys go through this next month, hopefully, James, you'll be able to get a response from the city as to what their requirements might be if we were to do this, as far as some of the things that Jim was mentioning, as far as walls and landscaping and all that stuff. Obviously, I think everybody knows if it becomes so expensive to be able to do this, it might be a deal breaker. So.
Okay, with that, adjourned. Thank you all.